Hi y'all, welcome back to Homestead to Health. My name is Caitlin and today is extremely hot. In fact, it's been extremely hot for about a week so far. I have not honestly gotten a lot done around here. For some reason there's some screaming birds. With the heat advisory that's currently in effect here in Texas, today alone was 111 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it's pretty warm. But because I haven't gotten a lot done, it's left me with a lot of thinking time and a lot of brain power that I've been putting towards my future gardening efforts. Starting with though this garden season that I find myself in, I'm really taking a look around, I'm taking stock of everything and thinking to myself, like, what's not working? What should I have done better? Maybe some things that I shouldn't have done at all. And so I'm going to share these thoughts with you. I'm going to be walking around and showing you some things that I've learned from this garden year so far. This right here is my shade box, and honestly you can see that it's been pretty neglected. Nothing is in this bed right now. And so I've actually determined, since this space has been pretty useless, I've determined that I'm going to scrap the idea altogether. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this hardware off, this PVC and the brackets holding it. I'm going to take all of that stuff off and I'm going to apply it to one of my raised beds. And I'm going to tell you why. Ladies. Hey, Arnold. Hey, Cluck Norris. This is another gardening space that I'm using right now. It's mostly just like some squash that I threw down. Excuse you. It's just some squash that I threw down, and some are doing really fantastic over here. These are some buttercup squash, and I'm having some success, but I've decided that since I love these sunflowers so much that I will be growing them on purpose next year. And I'm going to be putting them right over here in this space. And so this space right here, I think on both sides maybe, I haven't decided yet, that could be pretty awesome. But I'm thinking on both sides, maybe putting all of these sunflowers. Sunflowers this year have been a completely unexpected but beautiful thing for me. The ones in my backyard over here behind me, these ones were pooped out by my chickens and they grew, or maybe they scratched them down into the dirt a little bit for me. But I have absolutely loved them, and I've loved the big, tall Titan sunflowers that are in my large garden bed. And so I definitely wanted to carve out a space specifically for sunflowers next year. And I think this little space over behind me, leading towards the chicken coop, I think that that would be pretty great. These beds are doing pretty all right. I'll divulge more in this week's gardening tour. But I've decided that for next year, I'm going to keep making this into cucumber trellises, even though that one's kind of slow to go. I'm going to continue doing cucumbers here because they've been so successful. But this space in my garden, these raised beds, have actually taught me quite a few lessons. Do you see that handsome man? Boop, right there. But these spaces have taught me lots of lessons this year. One is that raised beds, to me, I think should be watered about every day, if not every other day. I don't water that frequently to establish deep roots, and well, honestly, I'm just kind of doing things trial and error. But these definitely need to be watered more often, and that is a lesson that I learned. But also I'm thinking in terms of future gardens. I think I have a different combination that I would like to do, because these beds this year have been pretty Mod Podge, right? Kind of like thrown together. But in the future, I hope to be way more intentional about my spaces, and so I've got some pretty great ideas. I think, now don't hold me to this, but I think that definitely next year, this one will be a butterfly bed where I plant lots of beautiful flowers, maybe some basil, because I've found that bees really like the bolted basil. And this bed here has undergone quite the makeover this past week. I have put 10 gallons of rabbit manure in here. I planted some beans. The melons are starting to take off in the back, and there's some celery over there. This bed is going to be the bed that I take the hoops off of the shade box and put them here. And the reason why is because I'm going to be creating floating row covers for zucchini and yellow squash. Now this year I got 3 yellow squash in total and absolutely no zucchini. Well, I've got zucchini repicante. I've got squash. It's just not the squash that I was after. And I still have a video coming out soon about squash bugs, everything about them. I'm doing as much research as I can because I want to have it loaded with awesome, helpful information. But definitely what I've decided next year for this space is to create floating row tunnels so that the bugs can't get to the plants. Now that does mean I'll have to hand pollinate, and I'm not sure how that's gonna go, but it's definitely something that's on my list of things to do. Next door are the gourds and melons, and I'll probably be tweaking a couple of things there, but really nothing major to report. Look at that big gourd. Oh my gourd. You eating a salad, George? You're such a good girl. You ruined. So this is the kids' garden, and it is absolutely gorgeous with all of these zinnias that planted themselves and the shorter marigolds and a couple of other things that are in here. I really like this space as is. There are a few things that'll be added in the fall. But I'm thinking in terms of next year. So we have the short flowers here and then the taller zinnias. I think adding something of medium height to really kind of pull it together would be nice. So if you know of a medium flower that you think the butterflies would enjoy, or pollinator friends, please let me know. So I mentioned that I want to have a butterfly garden in the back, right? And then I've mentioned again the pollinators in the front. I guess I should really tie that together by saying that I love my pollinator friends so much that it's really important to me moving forward that I really pay attention to flowers and invest some time in getting to know more about them. Honestly, I know my zinnias, I know my marigolds, and I generally can pick out a sunflower, but anything beyond that, I'm totally lost. And so while you're dropping comments about a medium flower, if you could also tell me maybe what your favorite flower is, I would really appreciate that, because then it could give me some insight on which flowers I should look into. As I live and breathe, this camera will never do it justice. Good morning, morning glories. Look, there's a brand new one coming. I've been giving a lot of thought here recently to my forever garden, is what I call it. So this is not the piece of property that we intend to live on for the entirety of our lives, but this definitely is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I've been giving my forever garden just so much of my imagination, really. And there's so much every time I come into this garden that like I think about, or I'm pulling information from like my past experiences. I'm pulling all this together, and essentially what I'm doing is collecting data mentally to gauge and decide how I want my forever garden to be. And guys, this garden has taught me some pretty harsh lessons. I think the biggest lesson overall is one, patience, of course. And then also just like a deep understanding that things not only take time, but they take so much effort, and there's so much to be proud of. I really struggle with comparison. That's not very typical of me, but I noticed it a lot this year. And I don't know if it's because I've been feeling a little bit more cooped up with quarantine and everything going on, that I just kind of find myself on social media a little more often and comparing myself to others. But I have been struggling with comparison this year. And so that has been a very heavy lesson for me, is how to detach from that, recognize what I'm doing, and to just be very gracious to myself. I have done incredible things, and this sounds like a pat on my back, but I deserve to be patted on the back over this. I have loved this garden while loving my children. I have nurtured and cared for this garden while also caring for them and a whole farm and a whole household, and predominantly doing it just through being extremely tired and stuff. And I'm not just here to toot my own horn, not by any means. It's just to say that I also need patience. Something that has been so heavy on my mind and so heavy on my heart recently is that I really need to focus on watering the gardener. And I know that's so profound. Come on, Caitlin, you're a poet. But that's, I mean, I'm being very sincere. A really hard lesson, my number one hard lesson that I learned this year after giving myself so much grief, man. I was comparing myself to others. I was looking at my garden, seeing things that just like constantly needed work or improvement, and I just kept beating myself on the back over it. And you know, why are things not done better? Why are you not doing more? You know, etc. Things on that line. And I had to like stop myself and really find a point of peace and tell myself, like, you need to water the gardener. It occurred to me that my garden would never seem satisfactory and I would never feel fulfilled by it if I was not already fulfilled with the fact that, like, I am aware of how good of a job I am doing. And so I know that sounds like such a stuffed up pat on my back, but it is completely necessary. It is completely necessary to recognize whenever you're doing the best that you can or that you're doing a good job. And I really needed that. So number one lesson, no matter what I say for the rest of this video, the number one lesson is to water the gardener. Always take care of yourself, take care of your soul and your own inner happiness, and then you'll just see that those things kind of bleed over. But I'm gonna get off of this, I'm gonna get off my little soapbox, and I'm gonna show you some more practical things that I learned about this garden this year. I'm not done yet. We're just in the deep heat of the summer right now. Deep heat. Which actually kind of lends me over to a point. I had to rip out my buttercup squash. They were just getting annihilated at this point, and I have all of the plans in the world to replant, and I was going to do that this week, but it is just way too hot to plant. You don't want to plant anything right now, and so that really only leaves me with the ability to weed my garden, and to harvest, of course, but weeding my garden, which is point number 2, my friend. This garden needs some serious weeding. Serious. So this right here is actually like where a row just disintegrated. I tried using a different kind of rope or a different kind of weed fabric, and it completely fell apart. And also you can see we mulched, but still I came through and I have weeded this garden 3 times. This will be my 4th time to weed it, and I mean, look at how tall that stuff is. Versus, you know, whenever I weed it, and I've still got like a whole stack of mulch over there in our driveway, but you can just see walking down just how bad these weeds really are. They're taller than the plants. And so I've decided, actually, my husband Richard actually helped me decide this, that next year, or even in our fall garden, if we possibly can in some places, we are deciding that we are not mulching next year. It was a really big financial investment. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but I remember it being in the ballpark of like $300, which is big money for us, like big money. But we thought it was a really great investment at the time to keep your plants, to keep them hydrated longer, because, you know, mulch is really good about trapping in moisture and all of that stuff. But honestly, I would be physically afraid to see what the weeds would be like without the mulch, because they're still so horrendous. They're really bad. And so our solution is to use this weed fabric throughout the entire garden, because even though some things try to creep over on this, it doesn't secure itself, right? It's just so easily to remove. But this actually does a pretty good job of trapping moisture in below it as well. And I mean, it's called weed fabric for a reason. My eyelids are sweating. Over in the gourds and the melons and stuff, that garden space is 100% just weed fabric. And I still have to weed over there, but oh my goodness, I've had to weed once, and that was whenever I was thinning plants out. I would just weed up as I went. Now, I would love for that to be the same over here. The only issue is there are some plants that require like burrowing that I could not use weed fabric on. So we would probably leave maybe like this row back here, this really long row, maybe leave that to be mulched, or maybe, I don't know, like map it out so certain patches are left a little open. Moving on though to point 3, which would be choosing my variations well. For the most part, I really like the tomato varieties that I picked, except for maybe some of the larger ones. But look how that beautiful tomato looks. Or maybe, hold on. Oh, there's a precious one. I would want to do next year something a little different. A lot of my tomatoes this year cracked, which actually brings me to point 4, which is I'm going to be doing drip tape irrigation. Inconsistent watering has also been kind of a bad habit of mine this year, but next year I'm doing drip tape, and next year I'm also going to be looking for varieties of tomatoes that are pest and cracking resistant. I will forever always grow my Hartman's yellow gooseberries from Baker Creek. It's just the perfect bite of tomato every time. They very rarely make it into the house, but my tomatoes this year have been a little underwhelming. I'm overwhelmed with tomatoes. I'm getting lots and lots of tomatoes, but especially whenever it comes to my big slicing tomatoes, most of them died in the greenhouse. I planted them 12 weeks before spring like I was supposed to, but then I failed to heat the greenhouse one night, and of course it froze that night and I lost all of my babies. And so I'm curious to see next year how much better my tomatoes are going to look at this point, so long as I don't fail them during the winter. As great as tomatoes are, and I really love my tomatoes, I've also really like peppers. In fact, I think I like peppers a little bit more, especially for like fresh eating and canning and coming up with condiments and stuff. I really appreciate my peppers. And so next year I have just this one row. Granted, it's like 65 feet and 2 plants deep on all sides. But next year I think I would also really like to invest in more tomato space. Now I've only got a couple more things that are floating around in my head, like I want to do better with my herb bed. I really don't feel like I utilized it to its full potential. I don't feel like I utilized all 4 of my seasons to the full potential. I completely missed out on having a spring garden because I was trying to set this garden space up, period, for my my summer stuff, what's in it now. And so I would also like to move forward utilizing all of the seasons better, and I mean just really growing and adapting. Some things that really didn't work out so far is the corn is a massive failure. My squash, I wish I would have went about it a different way. And there's just a couple of tweaks here and there, but for the most part, I'm really enjoying this year in my garden. And guys, I hope that you're enjoying watching these things. I hope that you're enjoying the kind of content that I'm putting out. I'm really trying to get to a great schedule of putting out 3 videos every single week. If there's something that you would like to see, please let me know. I'm very much open to all ideas, comments, questions, concerns. Please leave anything like that down below in the comments. Thank y'all so much for hanging out with me this afternoon. I hope that this walk around where I'm telling y'all what I've really learned and things that I hope to do later, I hope that it also inspires you to, just always strive to do best, but never forget to water the gardener. Don't forget about yourself. We can get so caught up in trying to make things always perfect and like looking a certain way and producing a certain way that we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves foremost. So thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. I'll see y'all later.